Welcome to Focus Nigeria. The security situation in Nigeria remains challenging, with different old threats not going away and new ones emerging with greater complexity. The forthcoming governorship election in Anambra State poses a different threat, as the indigenous people of Biafra IPOB are bent on stopping the polls. The Nigerian government is responding with huge deployment of security agents to Anambra State to provide cover for the election. For instance, the police operations in Anambra during the election will be led by 2 deputy inspectors general of police, 5 assistant inspectors general, and 14 commissioners of police. The total police contingent for the election is about 34,000. On our discourse today, we shall take a look at the security situation in Nigeria in the run-up to the Anambra State governorship election. My guests are Barrister Goddy Uwazuruike and Dr. Don Pedro Obaseki. Don Pedro Obaseki is a politician that joins us virtually from Benin State. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have Goddy Uwazuruike, a lawyer who also joins us virtually from us. Now, let me start from Goddy Uwazuruike. IPOB threat to disrupt the Anambra election, the security agencies responding with huge deployment. How do you piece these two together?
Well, I think the Anambra scenario is suffering from what I would call synchronized violence. In other words, there is a situation being created as there is a situation on the ground. The violence being reported in Anambra is more like something from Nollywood films. Why do I say so? Once in a while you hear IPOB has threatened this. Then after some time you see unknown gunmen moving up and down. And up till now, not one unknown gunman has been arrested. Whereas in Anambra, every half a kilometer, you have a police and military checkpoint.
I thought some of them have been arrested recently.
Violence and threats. Do you have any refugee camp in Anambra? Do you have any internally displaced people's camp in Anambra? People still do business in Anambra. Vehicles go to Anambra daily from other parts of the country. So how come we are not talking of Anambra is so safe, Anambra is violent, Anambra is this and that? Let's face reality. There is nothing wrong with the situation in Anambra State. If INEC wants to conduct election, it will conduct election. All this police scenario we are seeing now, these things are normal in the elections. Edo election was held the other day. It was like heaven was going to fall. People of Edo State said we must hold elections. And I can assure you the Anambra elections will hold and people come out to vote. With the sheer number of policemen already posted there, you can be sure that, one, every local government will have a deputy commissioner in charge. Every polling booth will have officers from the rank of superintendents, chief superintendents in charge. And they have a retinue of policemen guarding them. I don't see anybody who is against that election having that kind of security outfit.
Okay, we have Barrister Uwazuruike, a mentor leader. He's saying he believes nothing will stop that election. Perhaps when he comes back, we'll find out from him whether the threat issued by IPOB is not strong enough to dissuade people from coming up. But let's bring in Pedro Obaseki, and let's get your opening statement on the threat on ground in Anambra State and the state response to it.
Well, I laughed when my senior brother, Chief Uwazuruike, mentioned Nollywood. I happen to have been, once upon a time, a Nollywood practitioner. Anambra is actually was the center at one point of Nollywood. If you remember Upper Iweka, that is where we used to sell our movies. And the entire Anambra landscape is becoming a huge movie. And I think that is out of the 21 local government areas in Anambra, it trumpets the fact that Nigeria is faced with a larger existential problem. A problem that is premised maybe on security. And today, we must agree that the sheer presence of the sheer presence of the military, the sheer presence of the police deployment and the security deployment in Anambra is a pointer to the fact that Nigeria is more or less like a failed state, where vigilantes have become the norm, and the state security apparatuses are stretched. I want to say and put it on record that I do believe that the Anambra scenario is one huge test for the democracy in this country and the continued unity of this country. Anambra has never in its own history allowed themselves to be wallpapered or browbeaten by anybody. We can remember all the saga with Ngige. We remember the coming of Peter Obi and the fact that Anambra has remained the only state in Nigeria that has had ABGA, a state with none of the two major players ruling the state for the last 16 to 18 years. Anambra has had that history. And I think if the people of Anambra are allowed, without being seen to be browbeaten by unnecessary police presence, unnecessary politicization of the electoral process, we might just find out that Anambra will be another test case, maybe following that of Benin. Like Chief Uwazuruike said, in Benin, everybody thought heavens were going to fall. But the people stood firm, and they are standing firm. became the watershed moment for electioneering campaigns and actual elections in Nigeria. And I think Anambra will be another litmus test. And I just pray this government does not fall short, or INEC does not fall short once again.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Chief Uwazuruike. Glad to have you back. INEC has said it will conduct this election. The president issued a directive to heads of security agencies, deploy heavily. This election must hold at all costs. You also shared that optimism that the election will come and go. But I want you to comment on the threats issued by IPOB, 5 days at home to truncate their election. How do you bring that into the security measures that have indeed been undertaken to shore up security ahead of the election?
You see, if you turn Anambra into a police state, and an election holds in a police state, by its very nature, is a travesty. The fact that you have politicized the entire state and turned every kilometer, Chief Uwazuruike said 1 kilometer, no sir, is every 500 meters. Between, I just passed through Anambra a few days ago, and between the bridgehead at Onitsha, between there through Upper Idemili, Ojo to Oba, as you are going to Uwazuruike, you will find almost 37 checkpoints between there and Okija. Where on earth can that, and you say you are going to hold an election? So for me, I'm not looking at the wallpapering and the cosmetic fallout. I'm looking at the root cause. The fact that IPOB can afford to issue an order, and that order seems to be large enough to threaten even the sanctity of the elections, shows that the Nigerian federal state has a problem. And until that problem is looked into, what we are just going to be doing, we will just be talking and wallpapering things up and down. From Agwata, Oka North, Oka South, Anambra East, Anambra West, Anoja, Ayamelum, everywhere, Idemili North and South. When you talk to the people themselves, they want to hold this election. And once the people are assured that they will not be slaughtered on the vagaries of political considerations, this election will hold. That is my considered opinion. That in spite of the IPOB issued sit-at-home order, and in spite of the seeming militarization of the election process, if the Anambra people are willing, to hold this election will hold. However, I understand why Mr. President and the entire federal apparatus seem to be skeptical and scared. If the election does not hold, it will be the first major comma in the existence of this country as a continued corporate entity. It have to happen. I remember in 2017, Mr. Obasanjo, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, actually said, why don't you sit down and talk with these people? You are not talking with them. You are demonizing and branding them. You are calling them serial terrorists and stuff. Meanwhile, no single horde of Nigerians have been murdered, castrated, headed, brutalized, kidnapped, killed in their multitudes in Anambra, in any of the local government areas in Anambra, from Oka to Ojoto, from Ihiala. Nobody, there has been nothing. So what we are seeing is seemingly like a federal government-induced soap opera, where the Anambra people and the larger entire Alibo are becoming the serial victims in an orchestrated, how will I put it, demonization of a race. That is the truth. I'm not Igbo. I am Bini. I'm a proud Edo man. And we proved to them on September 19, 2020, say Edo not be Lagos. And Edo not be any other part of Nigeria. And I think if the Anambra people are allowed to express themselves without guns pointing at them at corporate and singular distances, we might just be able to salvage this nation via the Anambra state election.
Uwazuruike, your turn to speak now. The IPOB threat, you think is not enough to stop that election?
No. Well, I know we shouldn't take their threats lightly, but I can assure you there will be elections. The people of Anambra are anxious to elect the person or the persons that will govern them. Make no mistake about it, Anambra electorates will always be sophisticated. You cannot bamboozle them. As for the influence of IPOB, yes, IPOB remains the dominant influential body in Igbo land today. No doubt about it. Make no mistake if you think, oh, these are small boys. No. IPOB has been able to penetrate all strata of life in Igbo land, from the pedestrian to the man who has a jet. So, I will advise the government, you have 2 weeks to election, sit down, you know those doctors. Happily, Ohaneze is in good terms with IPOB. Discuss with them. As I discussing with them and IPOB, whether I call them banned, unbanned, illegal is irrelevant. Communication is the key. Now, if Anambra holds election, and I know the election will hold, I assure you that people will come out. Anambra has been practicing rotational governorship. They had Anambra Central, then, of course, they had Anambra North, they had Anambra South before. This time, all the leading candidates are from the same senatorial zone. So let us not make the mistake of thinking that they are pushovers. That if you stay somewhere in Abuja, you give that instruction. It will not happen in Anambra. If it comes to money, they have enough money, people. But it's not what will count. Check over the years. They have been electing Abga for governorship. Quite often for membership of the House of Representatives, for the Senate, and for the House of Assembly, they went to PDP. And they have coexisted. As it is today, IPOB will not interfere with elections. If they want to vote, they will come out. Nobody will stop anybody. In the first place, IPOB is not even armed. And Anambra is so militarized that it will be suicidal for any man carrying a machete to come there to come and stop them. No.
Okay, there he goes again. We hope to have him back. But Dr. Obaseki, he's talking of some talks ongoing. Perhaps when he comes back, we want to get to find details of that talks. But it aligns with the earlier position that nipping the problem in the bud will be the panacea, as it were, rather than military confrontation. Maybe you want to speak further on this.
I totally agree with Chief Uwazuruike. I totally agree with him. You see, I said earlier that in 2017, Chief Obasanjo asked this government to sit with IPOB and talk with them. I think they should try as much. They should try as much as possible. We still have 10 days to the elections. It's 10 days to the elections. There are ways you can mitigate these threats, and then you can create an enabling environment, not by escalating based on perceptions that are not on ground, that are not real. He just said it now, that Anambra State is so militarized that it would be crazy for any machete-bearing hoodlum to want to disrupt the process. Number two, you also said now that in spite of the seeming polarity, Anambra people have voted governorship one party and voted other offices another party, and they have coexisted. Not stopping there, Anambra people, whether we like it or not, look at the entire Indigo. They are basically the most upwardly mobile, with due respect to every other part of Igbo land. Look at how they fought. I used the Ngige episode at the beginning. With that, Anambra has thrown up huge political challenges, and these persons within this space have surmounted those serious political challenges. And I don't see this one being different. The only thing I see is that most of the clamor, the grandstanding, is coming from government. He just said, now, IPOB is not armed. IPOB is not Fulani headsmen. IPOB is not operating like the bandits, unquote, who are terrorizing Zamfara and Katsina, the president's own state. IPOB appears to be much more like a state of mind. And if you don't address that situation, that state of mind of the people, he said that they straddle the value chain, and they also straddle the entire strata of society within the entire Igbo land. So why do you want to wallpaper this with cosmetic arrangements? There is still time. If Afghanistan can talk, if the Taliban can talk with America in spite of the 20-year war, why can't we talk with ourselves? Why can't we just remember that proverbial line in our first anthem? Nigeria will hail our own dear native land. Though our tribes and our tongues may differ, in brotherhood we stand. I stand with the people of Anambra State. I stand with everybody in Anambra State from wherever. And I think if they are allowed, I use the word if they are allowed, because the seemingly politicization, militarization of our police presence, turning the state into a police state, within this, we only hit up the polity. And I think that if Anambra elections is not only meant to hold the election is not enough. It must hold. It must be seen to be free and fair, and the will of Anambra must be allowed to show in the result of that election. If not, we might just be, I sound this again, sounding a death knell for the entire political process in Nigeria, and maybe the entire Nigerian political structure, leadership, and federation as it's so presently constituted. Anambra is a litmus test, and this government must pass it. And they will pass it not by stifling the will of the people, because if guns are all over, the streets is going to come out. If I know that there are AK-47s pointing at from all directions at me, why going to cast a very civil in a military present? It will be a failure. Whether the results are read by INEC or not. Let me, my dear friend Amaechi, a few days ago, they said all the mass resignations of ad hoc staff, and INEC started defending it. And as of 2 days ago, yesterday, at 26th, INEC said they are yet to even issue letters of employment, of appointment to those persons, 10 days to the election. I was very involved in the Benin, in the Edo State election. And I know that if you don't do that just 3 days or 4 days to the election, I think there is the need for all parties to be brave enough, for the political parties who are taking part in the process, to assuage the minds of the people that this is one thing they must do for the sake of the Anambra people, and not for the sake of people sitting in Abuja or the sake of a few bands of politicians who's making sure that our take-home pay no longer take us home. I believe Anambra State elections will hold, and I believe that if the people are allowed to express themselves as they've done in the past, where they are the first to have changed the political timetable in this country, Anambra, I say again, will be a litmus test, not only for INEC and this country and this government, but the entire nation.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Two gentlemen have been with me. Dr. Don Pedro Obaseki, a politician who joins us virtually live from Benin City, Edo State, and Chief Ralph Goddy, Chief Goddy Uwazuruike, a legal practitioner, joins us from Lagos. Before we went on break, Chief Uwazuruike, we were talking of some negotiations. I remember this has happened in the past, but when we wonder, these talks among Igbo leaders, is it with IPOB, ESN, or no government? You said IPOB is not armed, but we know the unknown government are not just armed, but they've been wreaking havoc.
Okay, let me give you the distinction. IPOB is indigenous people of Biafra. They have an intelligence unit called ESN, Eastern Security Network. And ESN is under IPOB. Believe me, they don't have the money to buy AK-47 or to buy any of these Hilux vehicles. Those Hilux vehicles are talking of 20 million, 30 million. They don't have it. Now you talk of unknown gunmen. Unknown gunmen are not Igbos. You don't need to be told. When they came initially, they pretended to be IPOB, but not anymore. Right now, they go full force. They pass through checkpoints on the that. They are not Igbos. We know who they are. One thing we know is that they are not Igbos. And from their physiognomy, you will know. When you have a
some of them that have been arrested, if you can hear me, some of them that have been arrested, they are Igbo names. I don't know how you speak to that.
We know they are not Igbos. And we know that those who can afford to buy or move around with hillocks, set them on fire, and shoot, they are not Igbos. They are untouchables. So nobody can negotiate with them. Federal government has that duty of talking with those strange people. As for IPOB, the IPOB is an Igbo affair. Igbo man does not kill Igbo man. Igbo man is not a destroyer. He's a builder. So if the government wakes up today and says, we will have a chat, what is the means? Pick up a phone and call the president. He will assemble his Professor Bioza. He will simply assemble his team and they have a discussion. The only hindrance, of course, will come from unknown gunmen. And if as militarized as Anambra is, then they cannot deal with those people. Then we know, like what Abacha was said to have said, any insurrection that lasts for more than 24 hours, go and check government. If you doubt me, check Madeko under Abacha was blamed for everything. By the time Abacha died, the truth came out. Madeko did not do anything. Those people were working for government. So as it is today, applying Gobel's method of demonizing people repeatedly, so much so even you, the liar, will know that you're telling, will no longer know you're telling lies. You believe the truth. Anambra has no problem with elections. Dutifully, they brought out candidates. I would say 90% of the candidates are well educated in their one position, that any of them can be the governor. But the other 10% is what the people are afraid will be imposed on them. So in Anambra, they are looking for the elections. And they don't want to spill any blood. The blood of one person is as important as the blood of 100 persons. When Chris Ngige came the first time as governor, we know how he came in, the Oba family and their role. But when they wanted to deal with him as a puppet, he rebelled. They even impeached him, the people of Anambra ran to his side. They supported him. And he survived until the tribunal brought in P2B, and P2B, an excellent man, was there for 8 years. The first attempt to remove him by another Oba man was also resisted. So don't joke with the Anambra electorate. They know what is involved. They know what to do. As for the role of Ohaneze is key. Just pick up the phone and call Professor George Obios and say, I want to have a chat with these people. When they are doing that, please don't bring in all these psychophants. They call themselves, this is from the presidency. If you ask the way the president said, they said no, it is from the presidency. Don't call the Minister of Information. Some people are not needed. I mean, those decisions. The decision makers, not the hangers on around the corridors of power, whose job is to go and kidnap somebody from Kenya, bring him here, and then put him on trial.
Okay, I think we can have to leave it there. Some allegations you're raising here which cannot be substantiated now. But let me come to Dr. Obaseki. Beyond Anambra, the security threats are expanding. Even when the president has said it is going down, he's on top of the situation. And with increased efforts by the military, we are beginning to have firmer control of the situation. Fast forward to 2023, how do we avoid the Anambra scenario where the election will be enveloped in fear, threats of criminal groups, harming electorate? How do we use this Anambra scenario to prevent a recurrence for the 2023 general election?
I think the government has to up its game. Statements made from the presidency when it is not by the president is not going to continue to hold water. Before I just talk about this, I want us to listen or know the key in what Chief Uwazuruike just said earlier. We've known about unknown in the history of Nigeria, unknown soldier, unknown this and that. And he mentioned now that when Nadeko finally came, we found out that those dastardly acts were committed by Sergeant Rogers and his boys on behalf of government. He said now that the physiognomy, that is the physical look and shape of the recognized unknown gunmen in Igbo land, don't look as negroid enough to be called Indigo. Now, he also mentioned that logistically, IPOB lacks the logistical strength to be able to do some of the things accredited to it by a seeming propaganda machinery. He also said that it is important for government to identify the critical stakeholders in the Anambra process and talk to them so as to forestall something that may lead to, I don't want to be, we are on public television, a physical dismemberment of this country. It is key. And as a result of that, whether IPOB, ESN, or Hanes Indigbo, the government knows the critical stakeholders because, as he quoted Abacha, when an insurrection is more than 24 hours, there is a government finger in that tie. Now let's go to 2023. The government of Nigeria is operating, if we were not allowed to speak the truth, we will remain in perpetual servitude even to ourselves. When the lies continue, we call it a repeat motif in communications. It becomes a new truth, even if it's a lie, and you leave that lie, and that lie becomes a reality for you. Nigeria has serial vigilantes across board in almost every area of this country. Once vigilantes or non-state actors begin to dispense the duties of state, issue orders and people obey, carry guns to non-licensed people, creating security networks across the nation, Edo Security Network, Delta Security Network, Midwest Security Network, Amotekun, ESN, it just shows, it is symptomatic of the failure of state. And when state fails, it's a failed state. Let's not wallpaper that. So it is important for the federal government of Nigeria, under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, to begin to look critically at how to stem this in the tide. We have to quickly, now, 2023 is just around the corner. And that 2023, Nigeria, I pray, may still be able to stand to hold an election. You don't continue to hold elections as if election is war. Election is not war. It's a civil process. And once the civility of the process has been cast into doubt, the entire result of that process cannot be fair, even if it is free. If it is free and people don't turn out, like it usually happens in Lagos, where less than 17% of the in elections, or in Anambra, in Abia, where less than 16% participated in the last general elections, that is not a willful representation of the entire collective will of the people. So the government of Nigeria will have to buckle up. And how do you do that? We must congregate now the critical stakeholders within the entire nation, the entire, like in our area, the Midwest area, the Edo and Delta peoples. We want to renegotiate, retalk, sit down, and begin to address the serious problems that affect all of us, because we are the most marginalized in this country. The Igbos want to be addressed. Indigo want to know what is our stake in this process. If this stake is real, why is it that people are dying and killing people in Zamfara and killing people in Katsina? Not one unknown gunman has been heard. Not one bandit has been declared a terrorist. They are serially kidnapping children. 300, 200, they are passing checkpoints without any inhibition. And then you now come down to the south and you begin to demonize an entire race and place a stigma on them. I think that the president of this country must no longer just be the man we don't see. He must be presidential. He should come out and prove his presidency. Presidency is not a wallpaper. For God's sakes, this is the only country where our president is as unknown as the unknown soldier, unknown gunman. We have to tell ourselves the truth. I don't even remember how the president sounds like anymore. This is a problem we have to face. When a nation faces challenges, the leader leads in front. Not sending some people I did not vote. I did not vote for Lai Mohammed. I did not. Nigerians did not vote for any of them, whether the votes were real or perceived. They voted for a leader. And he has to lead. And leading is not by hounding people with DSS, SSS, any other SS that you have. The country will be a nation only if the leader of this nation shows leadership. I'm saying this slowly to emphasize the import of the seeming failure of leadership in the country.
I want to pose the same question to Chief Governor Uwazuruike. How do we prevent the Anambra scenario for 2023? We can afford to deploy 34,000 policemen to Anambra. We cannot afford to deploy 34,000 to each state of the Federation come 2023. We saw what happened in 2015 where the election was shifted to push the Boko Haram out of some states in the northeast. How do we prevent such again in 2023?
Well, I see Anambra scenario as a test run for 2023. If they succeed in truncating or bending the will of people in Anambra State, then you don't need to be told what to happen in 2023. The clamor for president of Nigeria from Southeast was at its highest before April. Then the synchronized violence started. By the time we finish, we could say Jack Robinson, the news everywhere is Igbo is unstable, Igbo is this, Igbo is that. That synchronized violence is what has been concentrated in Anambra State. If they succeed in disrupting the elections, then believe me, by 2023, you will be sitting in your room waiting to know what's going on. They're being told that elections have been concluded. An example is what happened in Borno, in Katsina, in Zamfara, and even in 90 states. In those states where either the terrorists they prefer to call bandits or Boko Haram and Islam, all those places where they're active, we have representatives up to the last local government. The local governments have been under control of Boko Haram for years. They have reps. So my fear for 2023 stems from what this government is doing in Anambra State. I believe that hyping of propaganda is key now, leaving it higher. Measuring the minor is what is obvious there. Threatening people into not coming out is actually what we're saying. Telling people violence, 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 whereas the means of coping everything is there. And yet in small Anambra states, very tiny states, I think Anambra is only bigger than Lagos State, we can't even have security well blessed. Anambra will still be peaceful. On the election day, it is up to the government. If there's any disruption, believe me, it is from the government, taking a number of people. In this country, 2023, I will not share the prayer of the governor of Ebonyi State, which is God give us another glory. I will not share the prayer. I'll be praying that we have a dynamic person who actually understands this country. The typing of incidents has been the major plan of the presidential spokesman, of the Attorney General of the Federation, and the Minister of Information. They are the ones frightening everybody. Now they will export it to the rest of the country. And when that happens, the peaceful transfer of power...
I didn't get the last bit you said. I didn't quite get the last bit you said here
one thing about
all the ministers and the history. But let me bring in Obaseki here. All attention, all blames going to the federal government. What about the state government? What about the leaders in the state, religious, political, traditional? Are there roles for them in the interim and in the long term in ensuring violence-free election in Anambra State? Perhaps you can address this in 1 minute, please.
Well, you know, in Anambra State, almost everybody there is a Christian, 99.999%. Even those who are not Christians, those I would say, we call them pagan, but they are not pagans. They are traditional religious worshippers. They still attend church service. They will have a tiny percent of Muslims. The influence of the bishops in Anambra State will always be there, will always be heavy. Anambra will not joke with their bishops.
Thank you so much, Uwazuruike. Let's hear from Goddy, I say Goddy, Don Pedro, Obaseki, Dr. Obaseki. Apart from the federal government, so much blames on them. What of the state government? What of the religious, traditional rulers? What about other stakeholders? Are they folding their hands to watch and heaping up the blames on the federal government?
I think it's time they all stand up to be counted. As Chief Uwazuruike just mentioned now, if all of them, if the entire Christian leadership, if the entire religious leadership come together in tandem, even if the government doesn't call them, you know, he's saying that the government should call them. Even if the government doesn't call them, and they believe in the collective patrimony of the Anambra peoples, if they come together this week, this Sunday, this Saturday, as one strand, they will be like a broom, and they will be easy. It will be difficult to break them. And I think the government will listen. The communities and the community leaders, the traditional institutions, if it was in my place, you know, once the Oba of Benin sneezes, everybody trembles. We will listen. Now, if there is some sort of structure like that, or a collection of all the traditional leadership, they cannot be more than a couple of hundreds, from all the 326 or so political wards in the state and the 21 local government areas. If they sit in one place and say this is the direction for the sake of our children yet unborn and for the collective patrimony of Anambra, I think that will hold. If the entire church leadership in Anambra, whether it's Anglican,
Methodist, maybe, and I hope they will take out this challenge. I hope they will take out this challenge because we believe it's going to be a multi-stakeholder approach to all this.
For engaging both the government and the people, because at this point, Anambra seems to be sitting on a keg of gunpowder.
Thank you so much, Dr. Don Pedro Obaseki, and of course, Barrister Goddy Uwazuruike, for giving us your time today, and of course, weighing in on this very critical issue. My name is Amaechi, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Till then, have a good time.